This is Mr. P, your math professor, trying to give you this knowledge on fractions and decimals. Math make it easy. Yeah. This is part 2, fractions and decimals. So let's look at it. Let's talk about it. This is my Algebra 020 students. This will be a great little quick snippet for you to inhale. All right. Let's talk about it. Fractions and decimals, part 2. All right. So the first problem, this is a problem where you see a decimal number and a fraction. So we're multiplying a decimal number and a fraction. Well, if you see a decimal, everything should be a decimal. So if it's a decimal here, that means this number should be a decimal as well. So you got to change this to a decimal. We already talked about it. You take the bottom into the top, right? A line up and all of that. So you change everything. When you see one decimal and you're doing operations with decimals, everything should be a decimal. Keep that rule in mind. So change it all to decimals. That's what this is saying right here. Change when you say evaluate, you see one decimal, then everything should be decimal format. So that means to change this thing to a decimal, you know this is 3/2. So you know that's 1.5 or 1.5. So that's that. And you know when you multiply decimals, it's a lot easier to multiply these decimals. You multiply these as if it's just the numbers without the decimal. So it'll be 61 times 15, right? And then, so you do 61 times 15 right here, right? And you get you get the 61 times 5, just 305. And then the 0 drops down, and then you get 61, but the 1 goes right here because it's up underneath this place value the 1 is. So 0 goes right here. So this will be really 915, right? But how many places behind? Remember, you got to count how many places is the sum of the place from past lessons. It's the sum of how many places behind the decimal point. So it's 1 here, and that's why it's lines on it. It's 1 here and 1 here, so that's 2. So I have to go 1, 2. So that's why the answer is 9.15, or in money terms, it'd be $9.15. But that's what the answer is to this problem that was up here. Yeah, that's the answer to this. So we got that out the way. Okay. Next problem will be evaluate. Substitute evaluate. Usually you got to plug something in. So they want you to evaluate this algebraic expression right here if x is equal to 1.2 and y is equal to 0.5, right? So we're going to plug this in there for x and this in there for y. So that's what this was doing. So I didn't change this. It's -2 is right here. The x, we're going to just substitute evaluate. This drop down. X is 1.2, so we plug in that in. You see the plus right there, the plus right there, and y is the 0.5 as we said up here. So when you plug all this stuff in, now I got some multiplying to do, but we got to watch our signs. So negative times positive is still negative, right? So you have a negative here, and it's like you doubling 12, which is 24, but then it's one place behind the decimal point, so I have to move back 1, so that's 2.4. This just dropped down. But now you got unlike. So you got to add 2 unlike things. When you add 2 unlike decimals, as we had in the past, what you got to do, sign of the larger subtract. So this is bigger than this in absolute value. So the sign is going to be negative, and you got to do 24 minus 5 in a sense is 19, but it's lined up with decimal, with the line up decimal thing. Remember we talked about line up. So it's negative 1.9. So remember you have to line up the decimals here when you subtract them with decimals. So this part is done, right? This part is done. You can rewind a lesson to understand what I said, but this part is done. What if you got order of operations decimals? Well, you got something like this. 1.5 times 12 over 2 minus 6.3. Well, I'm going to take care of the 12 over 2 first, which is 6. And then 1.5 times 6, you got to do next because subtraction comes before multiplication. So that will be 9. 9 minus 6.3. You got to line up the decimal, but it's really 9.0. minus 6.3, which is 2.7, right? So that ain't too bad. But you got to follow order of operations when you got more than one operation. And last but not least, so fractions, all fractions do this. All fractions either what? Repeaters or terminators. Either they're going to repeat or they're going to terminate. So if we was doing the side where repeat, right? So if you're writing 5, 6 as a decimal, remember you got to take the bottom to the top. So you got to do 6 into 5. And you know the decimal point's already here, so you lining up and treating this problem like it's long division. So, you know, you're going to have 6 going to 50, 6 times 8 is 48. and then you're going to subtract. You get 2 left over, bring down your next 0, and it's going to be 6 into 20 3 times. And this is just going to keep repeating. You're going to have 18. You're going to get remainder 2, 6 going to 20 3 times. It's just going to keep doing this. That's why it's called a repeater, because it repeats non-zero stuff, right? And so if it's a repeater, it's going to be a line above the 3 here. It's going to repeat non-zero, right? But terminators repeat zeros, which means it's really nothing. So with the number like 1/2, that's going to be a terminator, because when you take the bottom into the top here, when you take 2 into 1 here, 2 goes into 1, but you put the decimal point, you add your zeros. Now we know half of $1 is 50 cents, right? So you see when you do this, when you do the math here, right? And how do you even do it? You line up the decimal, and 2 going to 10 5 times, right? Right? 2 going to 10 5 times. So 2 times 5 is 10. You subtract, you get 0. Now 2 going to 0 0 times. But then it's going to be zeros the rest of the way. That's what makes this a terminator, because you can have zeros the rest of the way. This going to repeat non-zero, and this repeats 0. So that's that's the synopsis I came with. Terminators repeat zeros. Terminators repeat zeros. Repeaters repeat non-zeros, right? They're non-zero. The repeats are non-zero, right? So that's my take. So all fractions are going to do one or two things. If it's a fraction, it's going to either repeat or terminate as a decimal. So that's the thing you understand. All fractions are going to either repeat or terminate as a decimal. Okay? So that's what we're getting at here. When you change in the fraction to the decimal, it's either going to repeat or it's going to be a terminator. It's going to be a repeater or a terminator. Right? All right. So that's the rest of 5.5 part 2, and in a nutshell. And you can rewind this, play it as many times as you write. I hope you enjoyed the knowledge. This is your Mr. P math instructor jamming on YouTube for you with snippets real quick for you, fractions and decimals. Peace out. I'll see you on the next one.